Hello, I'm Oliver Colling, and this is the My 70s TV Childhood Quiz. Welcome back to Podcastland's favourite UK 70s TV trivia quiz. We are an offshoot of the My 70s TV Childhood podcast, which looks back at what it was like to grow up in Britain during the 1970s and the important part that television played in our lives back then. Before we get down to this time's quiz, I'd like to ask you a favour. Last year, we ran a very special quiz edition just before Christmas, where listeners supplied all of the questions, and we'd like to do something similar again. So if you're a mine of TV trivia information, then please let me have your questions and answers to be included in our Christmas special quiz by sending them via email to quiz@my70stvchildhood.com. If you're able to do that by Sunday the 30th of November, we should be able to get the festive quiz recorded and ready to roll just before Christmas, giving you the chance to play with family and friends during the Christmas break. As always, if you have any other comments on our quiz, you can get in touch via our blog at www.my70stvchildhood.com or via our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter/X, YouTube or LinkedIn. So, without further ado, shall we get on with our quiz? As always, it's just for fun and consists of 20 questions over 4 rounds. So, get yourself a pen and paper and a suitable beverage. I'm recording this weekend, so it's gin and tonic for me tonight. That sounds good, doesn't it? Hopefully I shall make it to the end of the podcast without drinking too much of it. Cheers. Right. Are you ready? Then let's begin with round 1. And this is a round called Trick or Treat. Now, this edition of the quiz is due to be released just before Halloween, so the questions are about programmes which were frightening or disturbing on 70s TV. By the way, I share Fry and Laurie's views on Halloween and trick-or-treating, which you can find on the internet if you so desire. Question 1. In which TV show did the infamous Faceless Nun appear? Question 2. The Finishing Line was a public information film released in 1977. It showed accidents, death and general misery really, and frightened me to death as a child. In what setting? So where was The Finishing Line set? Question 3. In the ITV drama Children of the Stones, very spooky just thinking about it, what was the name of the village where the Standing Stones stood? And question 4. The 1979 US miniseries Salem's Lot scared the hell out of many of us. It featured a writer, Ben Mears, returning to his hometown, which appears to have been taken over by vampires. Who played Ben Mears? And question 5. Which series of supernatural tales featured, amongst others, a story featuring the ghost of a whale and a couple in an isolated house under attack from rats? How was that? A few nightmares tonight, perhaps? That faceless nun caused me weeks of disturbed sleep. So, on to round 2. And this is our marathon or Fil Rouge round, where every question is based on things we've covered in previous episodes of the podcast. Question 1. A cheery episode from January 2024 looked back at Survivors, one of the most depressing series shown during the 1970s. What was the name of the Doctor Who writer who created the show? So, which writer created the show Survivors? Question 2. The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin had a dedicated episode in October 2023. What was the name of Reggie's employer in the first few episodes of the show? Question 3. In January of this year, we look back at Hanna-Barbera's cartoon Wait Till Your Father Gets Home. What was the name of the family's next-door neighbour who saw communists everywhere? And question 4. In February 2023, we remember the $6 Million Man, where we also mentioned the Bionic Woman. What was the name of the title character featured in the Bionic Woman? And question 5. Bod featured in June 2024. What was Bod's aunt's name? And there we are, halfway through already. Next, we have our famous Spin the Wheel and Name That Tune combo mashup round, which is the one where I spin our specially constructed Wheel of Fate to choose a year for the 1970s, and then we enter that year into our state-of-the-art AI-powered theme tune generator to choose 5 theme tunes to shows which were first shown on UK TV during that year. Okay, without further ado, let's spin the wheel. And it's landed on 1972. Okay, let me input that into our AI-powered theme tune generator and see what we get. Okay, and let's begin with theme tune 1. And here's theme tune 2. That one's been mentioned by many of our listeners. So how about theme tune 3?
The ingenious method of tunneling from a disused lady's lavatory into a bank has given this case considerable notoriety. But clearly your apprehension proves that crime does not pay. I am convinced that you were one of the prime organizers of this sordid robbery and find no reason for leniency. Therefore, George William Squires, I sentence you to imprisonment for 15 years. Take him down.
Bit tricky that one, I think. But what about theme tune 4? Probably a bit easier, that one. I love that show. And finally, how about this one? Right, and on to our final round already. And this is our general knowledge round called TV Times. Question 1. In the children's TV show Rainbow, what type of animal was George? So what was George from Rainbow? Question 2. What was the name of the bus company featured in the sitcom On the Buses? Question 3. When Eric Moulton was famously asked in an interview, what would you and Ernie be if you weren't comedians? What was his reply? Question 4. Which BBC children's TV show had characters including Bayleaf the Gardener, Constable Knapweed, Mr. Onion, and Sage the Owl? And finally, question 5. What was the title of the BBC TV show from 1977, which featured 2 gymnasts who get caught up in crime, and the theme tune to which was part of Kraftwerk's Autobahn? Wir fahren auf dem Autobahn, fahren auf dem Autobahn, etc. And there we are, another quiz done and dusted. So before I give you the answers, let's go back to last time's bonus question. I asked you this. Excluding the pilot, how many episodes of The Sweeney were produced? And you could have 3 either way. So the answer was 53 episodes. Well done if you got that right. This week's bonus question is this. How many angels were there in Captain Scarlet? And what were their names? As always, if you know the answer, then let me know by dropping a line to quiz@my70stvchildhood.com. All right, let's go on to this time's answers. Our first round, trick or treat. On which TV show did the infamous faceless nun appear? Well, that was in an episode of Armchair Thriller. Question 2, The Finishing Line, the public information film, where was that set? It was set on the railway. If you remember, the film featured a sports day held on the railway tracks and was absolutely horrific. Question 3, in The Children of the Stones, what was the name of the village where the Standing Stone stood? It's a good job I've not had too much gin before I say that. And the village was called Milbury. Question 4. In Salem's Lot, who played Ben Mears? And that was played by David Soul, who, if you remember, was a huge heartthrob at the time. Question 5. Which series of supernatural tales featured, amongst others, a story featuring the ghost of a whale and a couple in an isolated house under attack from rats? And that was a series called Beasts. And the 2 episodes concerned were Buddy Boy and During Barty's Party, both of which were quite disturbing, I seem to remember. All right, on to our Marathon and Fil Rouge round. Survivors. Yeah, cheery on that. What was the name of the Doctor Who writer who created the show? And that was Terry Nation. Question 2. The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin. What was the name of Reggie's employer in the first 3 episodes of the show? And Reggie worked at Sunshine Desserts. Question 3. Looking back at the Hanna-Barbera cartoon Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, what was the name of the next-door neighbour who saw communists everywhere? And that was Ralph Kane. Although if you have Ralph, I'm feeling generous, you can have it. Question 4. What was the name of the title character featured in The Bionic Woman? And that was Jamie Summers. And question 5. What was the name of Bod's aunt? And that was Aunt Flo. All right, on to our Name That Tune round. Theme tune 1. That was the theme tune from the sitcom Sykes, starring Eric Sykes, Hattie Jakes, and Derek Guyler. Theme tune 2. Now, this is from the series The Intruder, which many of you seem to remember fondly, and we may well feature in a future episode. Theme tune 3 I thought was quite tough. That was from a ITV show called Villains, which showed from a different perspective the impact of a bank robbery, with each villain being featured in a separate episode. So well done if you got that one. I think that was a bit tough. Theme tune 4, well, that was a theme tune to Colditz, which I'm sure many of you recognised. And theme tune 5 is a very interesting one. This is from a BBC TV serial for children called Mandog from 1972. And doing my research for this has actually solved a mystery that's been baffling me for decades. I've mentioned this on the podcast a few times before, about I had memories of a TV show where there's a girl in a wheelchair and we're communicating with aliens. Now, that sounds a bit vague to go on, but it was this show. I've seen an exit. It was this program. And they actually weren't aliens. They were people from different versions of Earth's future. So there we go. And I guess at 5 years old, there's probably a reason why I got that mixed up and thought of them as aliens. But thank you for the quiz, because that means I found out after 30, 40 years what that program was called. Right, enough of my ramblings. On to round 4, TV times. What sort of animal was George a Rainbow? He was a hippo. And question 2. What was the name of the bus company featured on the buses? That was the Luxon District Motor Traction Company. And question 3. When Eric Morecambe was famously asked in an interview, what would you and Ernie be if you weren't comedians? What was his reply? Well, he replied, rather cruelly, Mike and Bernie Winters. And question 4. Which BBC children's TV show had characters including Bayleaf the Gardener, Constable Knapweed, Mr. Onion, and Sage the Owl? That was the Herbs. Although if you mentioned the Adventures of Parsley, then I think you can have it as well. And finally, question 5. What was the title of the BBC TV show from 1977 which featured 2 gymnasts who get caught up in crime, and the theme tune of which was part of Kraftwerk's Autobahn? And that show was called Out of Bounds. So, how did you get on? Are you coming back from your trick-or-treating with a bulging bag of goodies? Or are you making do with a few old toffees from the old lady down the street? Whichever, I hope you've enjoyed our quiz. And if you have enjoyed it, then do tell your friends. And also, we'd be really grateful if you could like, rate and review the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. That's all for now. We will be back with our regular podcast next week and our next quiz in a fortnight. Until then, if you like Halloween, then have lots of fun. And if you don't, I suggest sitting with all the curtains drawn and the lights off in an effort to persuade the kids in the street you aren't in. Works every time. Have a good week and join me again soon for more from My 70s TV Childhood and the My 70s TV Childhood quiz.